grand opening is set this evening for the Winter Youth Games in Gangwon province. We'll take you live to the scene where excitement is building among the hundreds of young athletes who've gathered there from around the world. North Korea says it has conducted a test of an underwater nuclear weapon system to protest the joint military drills by South Korea, the U.S., and Japan earlier this week. Iran-backed Houthis have reportedly launched 2 missiles at an American-owned tanker in the Gulf of Aden. U.S. President Joe Biden says their counteroffensive against the Houthis will continue. It's January 19, 2024. This is Newscenter.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon. South Korea's eastern Gangwon province is where we begin our coverage this evening. The very first Youth Winter Olympics to be held in Asia kick off tonight there. Without further ado, let's connect with our culture correspondent Song Yujin joining us live from the city of Gangneung. Yujin, you're there where the opening ceremony will take place at any moment. How are things over there?
Well, good evening, Tongmin. Although it's raining, as you can see, and it's a degree above zero, because of the excitement of the Youth Olympic Games, it's heating things up here. So we're only about an hour and a half away until the opening ceremony of the 2024 Gangwon Youth Olympic Games kicks off here at the Gangneung Oval, which you see behind me. The organizers say that they're expecting around 9,000 spectators to be inside the venue itself. But at the same time, the opening ceremony will be broadcast simultaneously at the Pyeongchang Dome in the nearby Pyeongchang County. And as you know, South Korea is hosting its second Winter Olympics 6 years after the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. So the excitement here is real. So let's first listen to how much people here are excited about Gangwon 2024.
I'm a big sports fan, but back in 2018, I missed the chance to participate because I was a high school senior. That's why I signed up this time.
The opening ceremony seems to be a bit smaller than 2018, but I'm excited to see the athletes, the Olympic stars of the future.
My sister is going to be an athlete participating, so we're very excited. Our whole family's here to support her, and lots of friends and family back home will be watching online. Go, Maya! You're going to do great. Win or lose, we're going to have a lot of fun, and don't forget to listen for us cheering.
So as you can see, Chongmin, everyone here is ready to enjoy the games.
Absolutely. I can't really feel the buzz even from here. But Yujin, for those who are not familiar with the Youth Olympics, tell us a bit more about Gangwon 2024.
Right, so first of all, the Youth Olympic Games is specifically for athletes aged between 15 and 18 years old. This is the 4th edition of the Winter Youth Olympic Games. This time, 1,803 athletes from 79 National Olympic committees will be taking part, and that is a record for the Winter Youth Olympic Games. Now, these athletes will be competing in 15 disciplines across 7 sports, and most of the venues will be the venues that were used during the 2018 Pyeongchang Games. So this Gangneung Oval, for example, will once again host the speed skating events. And I also want to mention that the Youth Olympic Games offers us as spectators a chance to take a look at and meet the future Olympic stars of the future. And that's because most of the athletes I've met here said that their ultimate dream is to perform and compete at the 2026 Milano Cortina Winter Olympics. So let's listen to what the head of the International Olympic Committee had to say on this.
The expectations are that the athletes are using these Winter Youth Olympic Games as a stepping stone then for the Olympic Games. What we have seen very successfully in the last Winter Youth Olympic Games and Olympic Games.
And we've actually witnessed a lot of sports stars becoming youth Olympic medalists and then successfully transitioning to Olympic medalists. For example, snowboarders Chloe Kim and Eileen Gu. So I can say that the stage is set.
I do wonder who will be the breakout stars too. Speaking of athletes, what can we expect from Team Korea?
Well, first of all, South Korea will be sending 102 athletes, which is the most among all National Olympic committees. And we're expecting strong performances, especially in short track speed skating, figure skating, half-pipe snowboarding, as well as bobsleigh. So starting from short track speed skating, South Korea won the most number of gold medals in all the previous 3 Winter Youth Olympic Games. As for figure skating, we're expecting Shin Ji-ah and Kim Yeongdong to both medal at the women's singles and men's singles event, which will be the first time in Korea's Olympic history. And as for half-pipe snowboarding, keep an eye on Itaewon and Gangwon, both considered strong contenders for the gold medal. And last but not least, in bobsleigh, So Jae-hwan is on a mission to make history as the first Asian bobsledder to win a Youth Olympic gold medal.
Lots to look forward to then. Eugene, now I hear there are some events exclusive to the Youth Olympics. What are some of them?
Right. So the Youth Olympics is not just about medals, what kind of color of the medal that you're winning. It's also about educating athletes regarding safe sports, injury prevention, as well as mental health. So the games will provide workout sessions as well as workshops and group training sessions for the athletes. And there's also something for us, you guys who are watching, because there'll be the so-called Let's Play Winter Festival, which will offer spectators and visitors a chance to experience winter sports, for example, mini curling, mini biathlon, as well as attending a training session from Olympians as well.
Right, sounds like a lot of fun. And with the opening ceremony set to start soon, what can we expect tonight?
Right, so the 90-minute opening ceremony will follow the story of a girl named Uri who is from Gangwon province. But I think that the biggest spectacle will be the digital cauldron. So for the first time in any Olympic history, Gangwon 2024 will be introducing a digital cauldron using cloud computing and anamorphic technology. And because the ceremony hasn't started yet, we're not sure how the cauldron will be lit, but we know that spectators and visitors will be able to see the digital cauldron right next to the Gangneung Ice Hockey Center outside until the games end on February 1st. That's all I have for now, but I'll be back with more updates in our 9 o'clock newscast once the ceremony starts. Back to you, Jang-min.
Right. Enjoy yourself out there, Eugene. That was our Song Yujin live from the Gangneung Oval. Also in Gangneung, President Yoon Suk-yeol promised to empower young people and local economies as he sat down for coffee with university students in the East Coast city. The president paid a visit to the northern province of Gangwon-do on Friday, where he and Education Minister Lee Joo-ho met with 15 students, listening to what they had to say on things such as student life, career prospects, finances, and housing. President Yoon expressed his support for young people in pursuing their dreams. He also renewed his New Year's pledge to make sure government policies heed and quickly reflect issues encountered in daily life. Lee, who doubles as Deputy Prime Minister, has been working on pilot projects to transfer universities across the country to become hubs of innovation and development amid the nation's record low birth rate and regional gaps in areas outside the capital. Moving on, North Korea says it has conducted another test of its underwater nuclear weapons system as it continues to blame the U.S. and its allies. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji reports.
North Korea claims that it has tested an underwater weapons system in protest against this week's combined naval drills between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, saying they're seriously threatening the security of the North. That's according to a statement from the North's Defense Ministry on Friday, which said it conducted an important test of its Hail 523 system in its eastern waters. But it did not unveil specific details, such as when it was conducted or the test results. Hail, which means tsunami, is the North's underwater nuclear drone system that's designed to generate what it calls a radioactive tsunami to carry out strikes on enemy vessels and ports. The North claims to have tested the system twice last year, the Hail 1 in March and then the Hail 2 in April. To better respond to growing threats from the North, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan jointly conducted naval exercises this week involving the U.S. nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS Carl Vinson, for 3 days starting Monday in waters south of Jeju Island. This took place a day after North Korea test-fired what it claimed was a solid-fuel intermediate-range ballistic missile carrying a hypersonic warhead. The South Korean military said the drills were aimed at bolstering the three countries' response capabilities against North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Tensions on the Korean peninsula have been rising in recent weeks, with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un saying he has no intention of avoiding war, threatening to annihilate the South if it attempts to use force against the regime. 배은지, Arirang News.
Having met Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow this week, North Korea's Choi Sun-hee is now back home. Newly spotted this time was the North Korean contingent carrying a document insinuating space cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jong-sil explains.
North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported that a delegation led by Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee had returned to Pyongyang on Friday after an official visit to Russia. Choi arrived in Moscow on January 14th and met with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak, and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov before leaving on Thursday. During Choi's meeting with President Putin on Tuesday, her aide was seen holding a document that said observation list in space technology fields in Korean. Pundits say the document hints at a possible discussion taking place on technology cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow on spy satellite or missiles. Choi met with Russian Deputy Prime Minister Novak on Wednesday, and KCNA reported the two discussed wide-ranging cooperation in trade and their economies, among others. While meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, it's likely the two discussed details of President Putin's possible visit to Pyongyang.
There were official announcements from both countries regarding Putin's visit, so we think it's highly likely this will happen. We will keep a close eye on further developments, including the timing of Putin's visit to North Korea.
The South Korean Unification Ministry added that the international community was closely monitoring North Korea-Russia relations, and the cooperation between the two must abide by UN Security Council resolutions and should be done in a way that promotes peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
In New York, members of the UN Security Council met behind closed doors on Thursday to address recent security concerns triggered by North Korea. Also present was South Korea as it began its term as a non-permanent member. Choi Soo-hyung tells us more about what was discussed.
The United Nations Security Council met in New York on Thursday local time to discuss North Korean threats in the new year. This comes as South Korea, a non-permanent member of the Council, has requested international cooperation against the North security threats. Other countries such as the US and Japan also requested the meeting, which focused on North Korea and non-proliferation. In the meeting, the members discussed the regime's recent threats to Seoul and the international community, as well as the North Korea's launch on Sunday of an intermediate-range ballistic missile. South Korea emphasized that the North nuclear policy has changed in the last 2 or 3 years, so the Security Council should react not only by focusing on ballistic missiles launched by North Korea, but rather all types of security threats that harm international peace and safety. After the meeting, South Korea's UN ambassador Hwang Jung-guk said in-depth discussions took place. South Korea and the US urged the Security Council to break its silence, mentioning that Kim Jong-un, the leader of the regime, had declared a hostile relationship between Seoul and Pyongyang. However, experts say it may be challenging to reach an agreement on North Korean matters due to the current Security Council divisions. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
The health authorities here say the number of patients with respiratory diseases and other viruses has been surging because more people take their masks off these days. Now they are putting proactive emergency measures in place earlier than originally planned. Lee Soo-jin reports.
The relief that people felt after being able to take their masks off following the decline in COVID-19 infections will seemingly be short-lived as other viruses have begun to spread nationwide. Data released by the National Health Insurance Service on Friday showed that the number of influenza patients saw a whopping 91.2-fold rise in 2022 compared to the previous year. Cases of influenza have been steadily decreasing since 2018, but saw a sharp rise in 2022. Teenagers were the most commonly affected, making up nearly 40% of patients, as group activities in schools and academies more easily expose them to viruses, leading to a more rapid spread of infectious diseases. This upward trend is continuing as patients with acute respiratory infections have also risen to 461 in the second week of January this year from 368 in the 51st week of last year. But it's not just respiratory illnesses that are plaguing the nation. During the second week of January, 360 people were infected with norovirus, a highly contagious stomach bug that causes vomiting and diarrhea, according to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency. That's the highest weekly infection count in 5 years. Even more concerning is that children and infants between the ages of 0 and 6 made up nearly half of the individuals infected. And considering how norovirus infections are typically most prevalent between the third week of January and the fourth week of February, the patient count is unlikely to go down anytime soon. To combat this upward trend of both influenza and norovirus cases, the health authorities have decided to take preemptive measures. The KDC announced that it will implement emergency quarantine measures starting Friday instead of during the Lunar New Year holiday from February 9th to the 12th as originally scheduled. The agency and health institutions nationwide will ensure assistance lines and reporting service systems are ready before the holiday alongside 24-hour emergency helplines. Local healthcare institutions, pharmacies, childcare facilities, and kindergartens will also receive guidelines on how to prevent and report the spread of viruses. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
The National Assembly on Friday sent a special bill calling for an independent investigation into the deadly Itaewon crowd crush in 2022 to the government. The bill was passed during a plenary session of the opposition-controlled assembly on January 9th. Attention is now focused on whether President Yoon will exercise his veto power once again. The ruling PPP recommended earlier that the president should veto the bill and has called for negotiations to develop a new proposal that can ensure a fair investigation. Turning to the conflicts in the Middle East, Iran-backed Houthis have launched 2 missiles at a U.S.-owned tanker in the Gulf of Aden. President Biden says their counteroffensive against the Houthis will continue. Chung Eun-ju with the details.
The U.S. launched new strikes against Iranian-backed Houthi rebel military sites in Yemen on Thursday as growing tensions in the region's sea lanes disrupted global trade and raised fears of supply bottlenecks that could reignite inflation. The U.S. Central Command said in a statement posted to X, formerly known as Twitter, that the latest strikes targeted 2 Houthi anti-ship missiles that were aimed into the southern Red Sea and prepared to launch and deemed an imminent threat to shipping and U.S. Navy vessels in the region. The Pentagon said they were conducted by Navy FA-18 fighter aircraft. President Joe Biden acknowledged that the American and British bombardment had yet to stop the militants' attacks on vessels in the Red Sea that have disrupted global shipping. He said, however, that the U.S. military response would continue during an exchange with reporters before departing the White House.
Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
Hours after, a Houthi official said in a pre-recorded statement that its forces had carried out another missile attack against the Marshall Islands-flagged U.S.-owned cargo ship Chem Ranger. The official said the attack took place in the Gulf of Aden, waters just south of Yemen. The U.S. Central Command said in a statement late Thursday that the ship was not affected by the attack. Attacks by the Iran-allied Houthi militia on ships in and around the Red Sea since November have slowed trade between Asia and Europe and alarmed major powers in an escalation of the war between Israel and Palestinian Hamas militants in Gaza. The Houthis say they are acting in solidarity with Palestinians and have threatened to target U.S. ships in response to American and British strikes on the group's positions. Chung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
With the Israel-Hamas war now over 100 days, people in Gaza are struggling to get basic necessities that are so scarce, waiting in lines for hours just to get bread and water. Our Yoon has their story.
More than 100 days into the Israel-Hamas war,
People in Gaza are fighting another war of their own.
Today, the war is psychological, a war of fear, a war on food, war on clean water. There's no water and high prices, war of traders and war of high prices.
According to the Gaza Health Ministry, most of the region's 2.3 million people have been displaced from their homes. Those who have been displaced in the southern part of the Gaza Strip spend hours of their day waiting in lines for items essential for the survival of their families. Our life became all about queues. My children, husband, and I all wake up really early and we split. One goes to get water, one to get bread, one goes to fetch wood. This became our life. Approximately 80% of the total population in the Gaza Strip is now seeking refuge in the southern cities of Rafah and Khan Yunis, making the area even more crowded than before. The Palestine Red Crescent Society said almost 200 humanitarian aid trucks arrived in Gaza through the Karem Salem crossing and the Rafah crossing, bringing in food, water, and medicine, alongside a few more commercial vehicles. However, the aid coming in is not enough for the people in Rafah, and the prices of necessities brought in by traders' commerce trucks are also spiking.
A can of meat, which used to cost 3 shekels, now costs 15 shekels. Why? Because there is none. Life is expensive.
Al Jazeera reported that the Gaza Strip experienced a nearly complete telecommunications blackout for the 7th consecutive day on Friday. It added that conditions in Khan Yunis' Nasser hospital were unbearable, according to a doctor working there, as it was dealing with intense bombardments that have caused thousands to flee. Since Hamas's October 7 attack on Israel that led to over 1,000 deaths, the death toll in Gaza from the Israel-Hamas war now stands at over 24,000. Yoon, Arirang News.
A private space rocket blasted off to the International Space Station from NASA's Kennedy Space Center, Florida on Thursday local time with 4 European crew members on board, including Türkiye's first astronaut. The Crew Dragon spacecraft carried on SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket was launched as part of a 3rd commercial space mission by the U.S.-based Axiom Space in the past 2 years. 9 minutes after the launch, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 placed the crew's capsule in its preliminary orbit. The space capsule is set to dock with the orbiting outposts on Saturday. The crew members will conduct experiments for about 2 weeks. Tomorrow is Taehan, which means the biggest cold of winter. However, even without freezing temperatures, there will be snow or rain over the country this weekend, including in the Seoul metropolitan area. From tonight, rain or snow will begin again on the east coast area of Gyeongsangbuk-do province. As for the amount, with a heavy snow warning having been issued, up to 40 centimeters is forecast in the mountainous areas, and up to 15 on the east coast areas of Gangwon-do province. Jeju Island will receive up to 100 millimeters of heavy rain. Snow and rain on the east coast and Jeju Island will continue until the day after tomorrow. Most areas will see above freezing temperatures tomorrow morning. However, with gusty wind, the wind chill will be lowered by 2 to 4 degrees. Daytime temperatures will be similar to or slightly lower than today's. Seoul 7, Busan 10 degrees Celsius. Since the Winter Youth Olympic Games will be held in Gangwon-do province for 14 days from today, let's take a look at the weather there. Morning temperatures will not plunge to below freezing. Also, there's no need to worry about the cold during the daytime. But rain and snow are in the forecast throughout the day. Please be careful out on the roads. A cold wave of around minus 10 degrees Celsius will make a return next week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
Welcome. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, who's lying? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
강원 동계 청소년 올림픽 대회.
So, you want a special experience? What? Travel? Meet K-pop stars? Wow! Okay, tell me, who do you like? Of course I know them. Here's a tip. You can travel and meet K-pop stars. What? You don't trust me? Who do you take me for? Okay, come close. Closer. Simply K-pop contour. No need to thank me. Oh, you're watching Simply K-pop Contour. You're watching Arirang.
everyone. Welcome to Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. The 54th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum is nearing its end after extensive talks on a variety of issues. Among them, focus was on the positive role that AI can play, wars in Europe and the Middle East, and even the possibility of Donald Trump being re-elected as the President of the United States. For today's Within the Frame, we would like to shed light on some of those topics as we mark the close of this year's Davos Forum. And for this, we welcome Professor Pan Gil-ju from the Ilman International Relations Institute at Korea University. Professor Pan, welcome.
Good evening. I'm pleased to be here.
All right. We also have Lee Ju-wook, a member of the Executive Committee of the World Economic Forum. Good to see you, Mr. Lee.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Lee, let's first talk about the WEF's latest survey of chief economists. More than half of them said they expect the global economy to weaken in 2024. Could you share details of their views?
So the Global Chief Economist Survey actually draws data and opinion from chief economists, both from corporations as well as public institutions and governments. And as you mentioned, I think roughly about 56% of them predicted that this year the global economy would indeed weaken. And I believe that that's actually a reflection of both the uncertainties as well as many of the challenges that lie ahead of us. Those are not just limited to risks, still remaining risks of inflation, also limited fiscal space in many different parts of the world, but also on issues like climate change, the impact that there could be on economy, on emerging technologies, and also some of the geopolitical concerns that still loom ahead of us. What is slightly more worrying for us is the fact that many of the chief economists also predicted that the pace of fragmentation in the global economy would actually, in fact, accelerate. And I think that does underscore the importance of building trust as the theme of this annual meeting has been.
All right. Well, as our Mr. Lee already pointed out, Professor Pan, the economists also added that geopolitical fragmentation around the world will only deepen, which will eventually expand economic blocs around the world within 3 years. What would such expansion lead to?
Well, the geopolitical fragmentation or tensions indeed worsen the economic crack among nations around the world. Economic blockification also will pose a greater challenge to sustainable prosperity around the world. However, to be honest with you, I'm not sure whether economic blockification is the right word or blockification could be expanded significantly within 3 years. As you are well aware, the discourse of de-risking, not the one of decoupling, is underway now, which means the group of like-minded countries led by the United States is eager to maintain their economic relations with non-like-minded countries such as China, except for critically important technologies. To that end, the United States and China had a summit in San Francisco last November, followed by the defense level of talks recently. To be more concrete, I'm not sure whether the term of blockification is relevant in explaining the current international situation. During the Cold War, the logic of blocs was operational in the sense that the US-led Western bloc was conflicting with the Soviet bloc. Each of the two blocs remained quite separated from the other. Democratic countries under the Western bloc made military and economic cooperations only with other countries that belong to the same bloc. Likewise, communist countries helped and cooperate with other communist countries that belong to the Soviet bloc. However, as of right now, this clear blockification has not worked since China entered into international economic order through its membership in WTO in 2001. Although economic cooperation remains much weaker around the world now than in 2001, a minimum level of cooperation continues in the international arena. In this vein, I would say the logic of leagues, not the logic of blocs, is operational in the new Cold War. So it remains to be seen whether the logic of leagues will be converted back into the logic of blocks by worsening geopolitical fragmentation.
All right, I see. So basically what our Professor Pan is saying is that economic blockification would not be aggravated nor expanded considering the situation right now. All right. Well, Mr. Lee, I'd like to move on to what was really discussed during the forum here. Last year, cryptocurrency was the hottest topic, but this year it was AI. How is artificial intelligence closely related to this year's motto, Rebuilding Trust?
AI, indeed, I think was very prominently featured in many of the different discussions. And I think one very interesting discussion that we witnessed here in Davos was that there is perhaps a lack of awareness on not just AI's potential, but also on its limitation. So I think in order for there to be a better understanding and also an understanding to be enabled to create guardrails for this technology so that we can fully harness the potential, I think a lot of leaders stress that it's important to really understand where we are currently and also in a way demystify the technology. The reason why we feel that even discussions around emerging technologies really need to be anchored on building trust is because, as you know, that there are fragmentations also happening on different technology platforms, technology developments, which hinder, I think, the creation of a worldwide and also a coherent regulation around these technologies. And furthermore, one thing that we need to be mindful of is the growing gap that may come about between leading nations and other developing nations around these critical technologies. So how do we make sure that technologies can also be used for developing countries to leapfrog and not just be followers in that sense, I think goes back to the theme of building trust so that all different stakeholders and countries can actually work together around these themes.
All right, I see your point. Mr. Lee, one more question on AI. Some experts shared an optimistic view, saying AI would generate trillions in annual productivity, while others say there is a definite need to regulate the growth of AI, as you have previously mentioned. Could you share some of the views on AI that were made during the forum?
So again, I think to emphasize, there was a lot of attempts in 2023 to bring together different voices around the world. I think some have been a little bit more successful than others. And the emphasis here in Davos was really to try and identify both where we are and where we need to go and what kind of collaboration is essential to really get there. So the fact that we've had, as an impartial and neutral platform, as an international organization for public-private collaboration, both the voices of governments from the global north as well as global south, from the east and west, and also critically important, the voices of large corporations and also emerging startups, all discussing towards that common goal, I think was very positive. Of course, we're not naive that one conference alone can actually solve these issues and crack these challenges. But I think it was also an important milestone along that journey. We know that Korea hosts the AI Safety Summit this year, and also there are other platforms. So the continuation of dialogue, I think, will be critical in that sense.
All right, I cannot agree more. Now, enough about AI. Let's turn our focus on conflicts in the world. And so for this, Professor Pan, Ukraine's president called for Western unity and investment at Davos, while Western allies promised sustained support. However, considering the duration of the war, how would Western supporters really consider the war at this moment?
Unfortunately, situations look bad for Ukraine as time goes by. With the war prolonged much more than expected, Western supporters as well as Ukraine soldiers have faced the symptoms of war fatigue. Ukraine leaders and soldiers remain defiant against Russia despite this war fatigue, but their will to fight could be weaker without continuous support from outside. In the early stage of the Russia-Ukraine war, most Western countries were energetic in supporting Ukraine because this war served as a proxy war between status quo states and revisionist states. However, as the war continued for about 2 years, Western countries have remained divided over whether they need to continue their full support. The United States, as a leading country in the Western support group, has struggled with additional support for Ukraine due to domestic politics. The Biden administration laid out a support package of $61 billion. However, this package makes it hard to be a real policy due to strong opposition from the Republican Party. European countries that were under the most serious threat by this war do not seem different either from the United States. The EU laid out a 4-year aid package with a size of 50 billion euros, but this package has failed to be realized by the opposition of Hungary. Under this weakening resolve to grapple with the Russia-Ukraine war, multilaterally or collectively, some countries in the EU have independently been providing their assistance. For example, on 16 January 2024, France announced its plan to additionally provide missiles and bombs.
All right. So Western countries are feeling quite war fatigue right now, and this could be quite difficult for Ukraine to expect more support from now on. Professor Bond, one more question about the conflict in the Middle East. The U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan stressed that the U.S. is not looking for regional conflict there. What was discussed regarding the war in the Middle East, and what might Washington's position regarding this be?
Well, in this Davos forum, Sullivan made it clear that the Israel-Hamas war should not be escalated into a regional war in the Middle East. His comment was made in a situation where de-escalation efforts have been absent or neglected. Well, situations in the Middle East are getting worse indeed. The Israel-Hamas war continued for more than 100 days, and there are even signs of escalation, as shown by cases like the Houthi rebels' attacks on commercial ships and Pakistan's attacks on Iran. Washington seems to know that the United States alone is not able to deal with the two battlegrounds and control a fractured war. So the United States asks other countries to join the efforts to de-escalate all the situations. Meanwhile, we need to think over who would be the audience of Sullivan's comments to understand Washington's position. The first audience would be Israel. When Hamas attacked civilians in Israel, the United States fully supported Israel. However, Israel has conducted military offensives more than at the level needed to achieve its objectives and conduct self-defense. To top it up, Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu is reluctant to embrace the two-state solution that U.S. President Biden has emphasized. In this vein, the United States pushes Israel to be prepared for the post-war through de-escalating efforts and the adoption of a two-state solution. Second, the United States sends a message to the side of Hamas or Palestine as well. Washington emphasizes that the Gaza should not serve as a venue for making terror attacks on others, particularly Israel. What it means is that the United States will make an effort to allow Palestine to become a state, but at the same time, Israel should be secured in any case. This position is in line with the two-state solution. The third audience would be the Arab countries in the Middle East. Washington lays out the post-war architecture based upon reconciliation and peace between the Arab states and Israel. So Washington sends a message to Arab countries that the United States does not side with a specific country like Israel, but wants to make the region peaceful across the board. Finally, revisionist states in the world such as China and Russia are the audience as well. Confronted with the Israel-Hamas war, these two countries have indeed sided with Hamas to seize the initiative of the changing international order with this opportunity. In this vein, Washington sends the signal to these countries that the United States still serves as a relevant influencer or an effective stabilizer to the region, so that these countries are not able to intervene in the region in their favor.
All right, I see. Interesting. Now, Mr. Lee, since you have been at the very site, how have the two wars been addressed at Davos, and in what ways do you believe the forum served as a venue to, continue the discussion?
So as Professor Ban mentioned, of course, there was a lot of attention on the U.S. position, what both National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, as well as Secretary of State Tony Blinken, as well as other leaders from federal and also state level shared their views and their sort of projections around the role of the American government. But also at the same time, I think it was important to gather the stakeholders relevant for both wars, both in Ukraine as well as in the Middle East. We've had very prominent participation despite the ongoing conflict from both regions. Of course, as you know, President Zelensky was with us here, as well as a very strong delegation from the Middle East, and also other related parties, all of those that Professor Ban had just mentioned. And I think in that sense, both being a platform to allow for significant stakeholders to send messages, but also to facilitate dialogue, I think was one of the emphasis from our side. So we've had both public sessions where we could understand more and also have leaders from private sector, civil society really get a better reading as to where we are headed in terms of these different conflicts. But also there were many private discussions that allow in these kind of heated moments an opportunity for better understanding, trying to really find common ground. And I think what was also significant that was different from previous annual meetings was that we had held, together with the Swiss government, the gathering of national security advisors from more than 70 countries to really kick off the discussion here in Davos and really try to work towards the peace process in Ukraine.
All right. Well, I agree that bringing all the stakeholders together at the one side is very significant indeed. Now, Professor Ban, interestingly, the word is that Trump's potential re-election as U.S. president was very much part of the conversation at Davos. And some even directly pointed out that his return would be a great concern for the world. What's your view on this?
As you might be aware, Trump issue is being raised on many platforms simply beyond the Davos forum. If then, why is Trump's potential re-election more attentive in this Davos forum? The reason behind this is that when the Davos forum happened, Trump won in the Iowa caucuses, serving as the first in the presidential race. What it means is that Trump's potential return is more visualized. Despite Trump's landslide victory, the unpopular incumbent of the White House, President Biden, has no intention to give up his bid for re-election to the other, unlike Lyndon Johnson's abandonment of his bid back in 1968. So the Trump issue has overwhelmed other pre-planned issues such as security and AI in this Davos forum. The Trump variable is not simply a domestic issue of the United States, but a global challenge because, first, the United States role remains the most significant for preserving this international order. And second, Trump earlier showed little interest in preserving rules-based order under the policy of America First policy. And third, he neglected alliances for America's interests. Similarly, the issue of support for Ukraine that we dealt with earlier is vulnerable to Trump variable as well. To be more precise, Trump is not much interested in preserving a liberal international order or restoring trust that was laid out as a key theme in this Davos forum. If the United States under the Trump administration neglects to maintain a liberal order and trust building, other countries from the liberal world are most likely to lower their enthusiasm to preserve a liberal international order. If this concern becomes visualized indeed, autocracies are most likely to step up their efforts to redesign on international order in their favor. This is a great concern.
All right, I see. Now, Mr. Lee, before we wrap up the show, I'd like to ask you this last question. Davos indeed gives world leaders a chance to mitigate factors that lead to global conflict. But as these conflicts make it difficult to, rebuild trust around the world, the relevance of the forum has often been up for debate. So how do you think about such a view, and how was this year's forum overall?
First of all, I want to just quickly comment on Professor Ban's analysis around the U.S. election. From our perspective, I think, of course, it was true that there was a lot of attention towards, what a potential Republican government would actually be like, and what kind of implications could be drawn from that. But at the same time, I think it would be an overstatement to say that issue, a single issue, actually overshadowed everything, simply because there are so many different challenges that we face that we need to, and going back to the emphasis on the multilateral order and the cooperation between countries, that every leader, I think, gathered in Davos acutely acknowledged that they cannot solve alone. So there were many different discussions, and going back to your question on rebuilding trust, at the beginning of the preparation for this year's annual meeting, of course, there was a lot of concern whether the looming crisis and emerging challenges that we see would actually dampen the ambition for leaders to come together. But I think what we saw was actually on the contrary, that because of these different challenges, and also because of the realization that we currently face a grave trust deficit, I think on every leader's mind, it was a priority that we need to kind of build that foundation to be able to advance with cooperation. Again, I think the forum as an institution, we are not naive that one dialogue would actually solve all of these issues. But I think we do need to make a start. And as I've said, together with other major international platforms, ongoing dialogue, ongoing collaboration. And I think, the positive thing, again, that Professor Ban mentioned at the beginning is that, unlike during the Cold War days, we're not seeing, complete shut-off of trade or relations, even between countries that are competing. And I think one clear example is that, between the U.S. and the Soviet Union during the Cold War, their sort of annual trade is equivalent to what is now the trade between the U.S. and China on a daily basis. So all of these things, I think, make it really important that we continue to emphasize the need for collaboration. And really, the building of trust, I think, is the first step and the most important task to begin with.
All right, Mr. Lee, thank you for your point of view. Now, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Ban and Mr. Lee, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be next Monday with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the weekend. Goodbye.